So this is just a random questionnaire I found on the internet. I modified a few things, but there's some questions here that might not apply. There's one question, at least one, where I don't even know what these things are. So you're gonna have to maybe explain them to me. If you know, maybe
If
you
I
don't,
know, yeah.
and then we're just wasting our time, which is great. Okay, so this is just in terms of preferences. These first few, turn-based or real time. What's your preference? Turn-based or real time?
I think 100% my preference used to be turn based when I was younger. I think now I would have to say it's real time.
How come?
Uh, when I was younger, turn based seemed it like appealed to the type A aspect of me of wanting to perfectly efficientize everything and give me time, right? I wasn't really a gamer yet. I didn't feel like I could do the mechanics or, I didn't want to struggle with that aspect of the game. So turn based seemed like games that were more for thinking, which I thought, was my forte and allowed me to just really come up with the best combo or a plan and a strategy, which I still like to do. Um, but these days, I find that the games like Final Fantasy that I used to love, that were all turn based RPGs, are just like I hit a moment where I go, I'm just clicking buttons in a menu.
Hmm.
And it's hard for me to not forget that. And I've started enjoying and getting better at live action games too. I always liked, kind of action adventure games. So that form of real time appealed to me. And I think that I've found fewer games that are turn based that have been as exciting as some of the real time ones these days.
Do you like being able to pause in real time, or would you rather that being taken away from you so that you can just focus on being present and immersed?
I think pausing is always good. Games that kind of bridge, I mean, I'm still, a little bit, I'm definitely don't have good mechanics at gaming still. So, that isn't my strong suit as a gamer is crazy mechanics or anything. So anything that where I can take a break. And also as an adult, I feel like pause is just important. When you're younger, you have time to just sit there and finish something. But now something can come up and I need to pause. Having built in ways that you can pause the game, even though it's true that after you unpause, pretty much always everything goes to shit the second you start up again. It's still good to have the option, I feel like.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Like, I like games that are real time with pause, probably, so that I can pause it and do things while I'm paused. So I can, change things around, make decisions while I'm paused, but not suffer the consequences of it yet. But then I get into this habit of having my finger over the space bar so that anytime anything happens, immediately pause, deal with it, so I don't lose any time, which then makes the game take such a long time because the time is not flowing forward. And I'm talking about maybe grand strategy games more than than action adventure potentially. There is a mystique and something interesting about turn based. But that again gets me into the perfectionism that you're talking about. Like, I want to get everything right before I hit end turn. And the games that do best with this, Divinity Original Sin 2, for example, where the combat is turn based. There's only so much I can do. I can certainly think about my movements and actions in my turn, but once I pressed it, it's done. I can't undo it. Um, and so I'm going to just follow that, and it doesn't actually take me that long. But it can be really cumbersome if a encounter comes up with one creature that should take 3 seconds to dispatch, and it takes 3 minutes because I'm making sure I'm doing the right things with each character and whatever. And before I know it, I've spent 3 hours and I haven't moved anywhere. And so I've learned in the time that I've spent in games to almost trick myself into not trying to perfect everything. And one way that I do is having Iron Man mode on some games, the inability to save and load, to have one save file that you can't go back on, that you can't essentially save it before an event, have the event occur, and then go back to the save. That kills me inside because what if something goes bad and it ruins everything? But my experience is far superior when I let myself go, when I surrender to the free flowing arrow of time, so to speak. Do you have a similar thing with Iron? Do you play with Iron Man mode ever in some games?
Um, I find that I have been trending towards games that people cite as being difficult, and doing difficult challenges even within those games more and more. But I'm definitely, it's funny because I kind of learned this about myself in playing Hollow Knight and in playing The Binding of Isaac, that I am really okay with just failing over and over and over again, and probably more so than maybe other gamers are, because both of those games are considered quite difficult. And I'm not very good at them. I have watched other people play, and they achieve certain success faster than I would have. And yet they're frustrated sooner than, like, I never really get frustrated with those games. And, it'll take me like a really long time to beat a boss, or, I'll die over and over and over again. But I don't really feel necessarily frustrated by it. I'm okay to keep doing that. Whereas I'll see some people that, they beat a boss on the third time instead of the 15th time, like I would, and they still consider that like, oh, I did so poorly, and this game is so hard. Like, am I built different? Like, I'm just okay to be really terrible at something. And in some ways that means that I complete a lot of these harder games where other people maybe give up sooner and just decide that feeling, whatever that feeling is of that failure, or that trying and trying again and only getting slightly better each time, that it isn't for them. And so I think these harder games, right, to come back to what you were asking about, it's not so much that I've tried specifically what you're talking about, but I do seem to seek out still challenge in games, and ones that, yeah, I can't just recover from necessarily quickly, like where there is something you need to overcome. I think the only thing is I haven't played as many of the real-time strategy games as you have, so I don't have that same experience with that kind of, like, I can't remember. I don't use saves, I guess. I don't really play games where I ever go back to an old save.
Okay. Yeah, so a lot of the games that I've played, so Stellaris, we've mentioned
Mm-hmm.
before, Hearts of Iron 4, a lot of the Paradox games, but also Starcraft or Warcraft. I'm talking about the original Warcraft, which people are like, wait, Warcraft? That's not. Yes, it was a real time strategy game once upon a time that I played a lot of. Command and Conquer, all these old school 1990s, 2000s real time strategy games are interesting because they're, for me, they became all about the save and reloading the save. And then even the RPGs like Baldur's Gate, Icewind Dale, those Infinity Engine games, the isometric view games are all about making sure you save before an encounter so that you can reload and try it again until you finally get it after 15 times. So for me, that the whole concept of the saved game is
Mm-hmm.
hugely important in my experience, and probably has influenced my life, the way I look at the world. We talked about this with Doki Doki Literature Club, the removal of the saved game, all of a sudden feeling like you've been marooned in the game and all the things that you thought were protecting you were gone. What a wonderful feeling for someone like me who really depends on that save, who really thinks, I'm okay. I'm almost free to go out and experiment and cause mayhem because I can always reload. SimCity or City Skylines in the modern terminology, or the modern game that's just better than the SimCity games that came before it. Like, perfect example of, I'm going to watch my city become completely destroyed, or I'm going to make a really dumb decision and build a district that is going to be really bad, and I know it, but I'm going to go back to my perfect city or perfect plan that I had before. That's crucial for me in the games that I've played, and I almost need to force myself out of it. And by extension, one thing that I sometimes need games to force me to do is use the things I've collected, because I'm a
Mm-hmm.
collector.
Yeah.
And like, if I will play, so a game that I played a few weeks ago, Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous,
Mm-hmm.
another CRPG. I probably haven't used a healing potion in that game. Probably have like 182 of them. Why?
We-
Because I'm going to use 182 potions in one single encounter. And these are also things I can buy with my 80,000 gold pieces. Like, stop it. Use these things. That's part of the joy. But I'm a hoarder. I'm a video game hoarder. And I've almost trained myself into that
Mhm.
corner.
Yeah, we call that too good to use syndrome. Too good to use is, and I definitely suffer from that. I think there's maybe, and we are very similar in many ways that we approach gaming, I think, and maybe it's just partly a worrier thing. Like you're always like, well, if I don't really truly need it now, there could be an instance later where I do need it, right?
Yeah, it's being economical, right? Like I'm always thinking, you're right. I don't need it now. There's something else that I can use now that I'm going to replenish tomorrow.
Yeah.
So I'm always being economical with the most basic of things. Whereas I envy the person who comes in, hey, that'd be fun to drink that wacky potion. And I'm thinking, no, I might need it to open
Yeah.
some crazy door in 30 hours of gameplay. Like just give up, because the game developers have built this game not to be foolproof, but to allow you to succeed no matter how crazy your choices might have been. I don't need to do that, but it's maybe my approach of life. Like I'm a contingency planner by nature.
Same. Yeah.
Yeah.
But coming back a little bit to the save question, because one of the things about saves in games, the way I mostly use saves these days, it's literally just a save of the game, as in I'm not going to lose, that when I put my game down and I pick it up, there's there's my same game there. And that would be terrifying if I literally had to play a game
Sure.
start to finish or something, right? Without having a save. But the other thing about using saves in games that I think is really worthwhile, and actually, even for us, as long as we're using it in this way, might be helpful, is that it allows you to be creative and to do things that maybe you don't know the exact outcome of, and to test, right, and explore. And the worry is, imagine that you're playing in Iron Man mode, let's say. You are probably never going to take a risk because you can't undo it. So that's bad too, because that's, if you're anything like me, you generally don't take risks also because, it's too much of a risk. You're not really a risk taker necessarily. If other parts of our personalities are similar, I'm not a huge risk taker. Now in video games, you kind of get to do that because it's not real life. And,
Yeah.
especially when there's that safety of a save, you can maybe take a risk. And depending on the style of game, I think that can be good to get somebody out of a rut from playing the same way that they would always play, to say, okay, on this save, I'm going to play a different way, or, I'm going to try something. Whereas if you don't have that, you could be stuck just playing a very safe, like you could play a way that you always win or something. Let's say you're playing Civ and you know that you really always win with a science victory or something, and you're just never going to try anything different because you don't have that safe backup, and you're just going to do the easy thing that works. So I don't know. I think there's a benefit to it as long as you're not using it to over economize everything and make everything as perfectly efficient as it needs to be for
But
no
but
reason.
but that's what I do. Like there's a lot of juice. There's a lot of juice here in this conversation because I can see my faults from a 30,000-foot perspective now, and I'm thinking like, what am I doing? I will play on story mode, so essentially the easiest mode that you pretty much can't die because you're paying attention to the story. And I will not use the potions. I will not use any of the items. I will be careful with everything. I will economize to the max. I will pause every chance I get. And if I can avoid the pausing, like even though I'm protecting myself in every way, I still sometimes don't take risks. And my mind is telling me, oh, it's okay. I'll take risks the next time I play the game, the next time I do a playthrough. I'm not going to play this game again. I don't have time for this. What am I thinking? Now is the time to take risks. And I think there's a really interesting corollary here to parenting and child rearing.
Mm.
So I'm a dad. I've got a kid who's almost a year old now. And every day you're dealing with this balance of freedom versus control.
Mm-hmm.
At 1 year old, it's mostly control. At 1 week old, it's 100% control. There's nothing that child is doing that you're not there for. At a year, yeah, I'm letting him crawl around. I'm letting him get in trouble. He's falling off of things. He's hurting himself. He's eating stuff he shouldn't eat. But I'm letting that happen because he needs to be okay to take risks and suffer the consequences of it too, to learn from his experience. If I am a helicopter parent that protects him from everything, he's going to be screwed in life. But at 1 year old, if I let him fall off of a table, he's screwed for that too, because he's going to die, right? Or have serious injuries. So this balance between the two, and it's really interesting because a lot of the philosophy of parenting will tell us that if you are always there to protect your kids, but not always stepping in, they will feel the freedom to take risks. They will think, I'm good. Like, I think that that's how my kid sometimes approaches things. Like, he's not afraid of anything. He'll climb stairs 10 times in a row, knowing that, maybe he doesn't know that if he falls, he's going to hurt himself, because he knows that we're there. But to what extent is this building him for an appropriate level of taking risks in life? Because we have to be calibrated here. The answer to life is not take risks, be bold all the time. There are many situations where you really shouldn't take any risk, and there are situations where you should take a modicum of risk. And I'm sometimes too careful. This whole project of becoming a game developer is based on me taking a risk that, after a long time of thinking about, I needed to push into it, because there's a lot that could go wrong here. I'm taking time away from other ways of producing income. I'm taking time away from other skills that I could be developing. I'm doing it at a very late stage. All of this stuff. And risk is something that I want to become more comfortable with. But at the same time, I know that the reason I do things that I do well, I do them well because I'm calibrated, because I'm careful, because I think it through, because I'm a contingency planner, because I'm going to think about A, B, C, and D when the other guy's thinking only about A. So that's, it's really tricky, and it has a lot to do with gaming. And I imagine that you feel the same, maybe not obviously about parenting, but about taking risk and about how you approach life. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So you as the parent, you're the save. You're the backup,
Yeah, but
right?
sometimes I need to delete myself. Sometimes I need to play a Doki Doki on my kid and not be there all of a sudden, so that he's going to have to figure it out for himself. But you're totally right.
But
I'm the
not
save.
yet. Yeah, not yet. See, now you need to be there so that that your kid learns that they can take risks and it'll be okay.
But how did I get to the point where I'm I've got every precaution, I've got every net that'll capture me in playing a game, and I still don't? I mean, I'm asking you as a psychologist, which you obviously are. Why do I, at that point in playing a game, still uh, play the careful route?
I don't, if we're taking psychology here, it's probably some sort of trauma in your childhood, obviously. No, I
Yeah,
mean, it's
yeah,
it's the same. I'm the same exact way. I'm a super careful, cautious person, and like overly so, but I'm also, and that developed into being an anxious person, right? Like it like unreasonably for no reason. Like that's what anxiety is. But I think the difficulty is that people like us do see success from our behavior, right? You pointed out that being cautious, you feel, has led to a lot of the success that you've had. And I feel the same way, right? Like being a calibrated, as you were saying, person, and somebody who thinks things through and plans and all of those things that I think about myself as well. I attribute a lot of those things to why I've had successes that I've had. And maybe that's the thing that is holding us back, is that we don't want to think of this thing about ourselves as at all having, negative aspects, except maybe being, slightly more uptight because we're careful about things all the time, or but I think that's where it's hard to let it go, because we associate it with success for whatever reason in our lives. When we've behaved this way, or when we haven't behaved this way, we've had negative consequences, and it's reinforced that we should.
yeah,
And you know other people, obviously there are personality types that are not careful at all and go head first and headlong into things. And I don't know if you felt this way, but I used to, when I was younger, I used to go, man, I do everything the hard way, and I'm getting beaten by people doing everything the easy way, right? The people that aren't thinking anything through, they aren't like actually doing
I
anything that's
know.
good for them or whatever. And we're, competing for the same things. Let's say I was in high school, we were competing for scholarships. And here I was taking calculus and chemistry and physics, right? And all these courses. And our grade point average was being compared with somebody who was band, art, drama. I'm like, why am I doing this to myself? I'm purposefully making my life harder, you know? And I've struggled with that my whole life, thinking that, what, it seems like they're still doing fine. People who aren't taking all these precautions, the kids who eat sand, they're still fine.
Well, was it George Carlin who said the kid who eats too many marbles doesn't grow up to have kids of his own, um, which is sometimes not true. Sometimes that kid does have many children, and we
Mhm.
end up in idiocracy.
Yes.
But no, I think you're right about rewards too. Like I've been rewarded by being cautious and careful. I'm a really good speller.
Mhm.
I don't have to look at a dictionary. It's important to me that when I send someone a text message, I review the text message and make sure that I've spelled everything correctly in the Canadian way, having a
Mhm.
U in color and favorite. When I'm driving down the road and I see center spelled ER in this country, I
Right.
get really mad because that person wasn't careful like I'm careful. That's led to success as a writer, obviously. That's spelling isn't necessarily uh, a requirement to be a writer, but understanding the power and the concisiveness of language, the concision of language is important. So it's led to success. But I certainly don't celebrate that in me. I probably beat myself up for that and wish that I was taking more risks. Like it's almost the analogy of say you spend 3 months learning to play an instrument like the flute and you're just working at it, and then your friend comes over, picks it up, and within 2 minutes they're better at it than you are
Right.
because they don't care, they're not trying so hard, they just do it. I've always admired, I don't know about admired, that I've always envied that. A dark part of me has wished for that. But yeah, the grass is always greener on the other side, and typically the answer is probably in the middle here. But it is a fascinating conversation about our personal lives that also take place in games, about how we monitor, take, manage, mitigate risk. Um, and yeah, I mean, there are so many different examples. We can talk about finances and how people take risks in the stock market and how the careful investor compares with the risk taking investor.
Do you think that most people play games that aligns with the way they live their lives, like their personality?
Yeah, I don't know. That's a really good question because you would assume that people would do the opposite, right? You would assume that people would say, I'm playing a game. This is the chance to be the person I'm not. So I was watching someone stream. It was an RPG. I don't remember what it was, but they were saying that they wanted to play a really evil character, like chaotic evil, causing mayhem and destruction everywhere they went because they didn't want to play themselves, because most people in our day-to-day lives are, probably lawful neutral in the D&D categories of alignment, where we obey the law, good or evil. Yeah, I mean, if good and evil is about how selfish you are, we're probably close to evil, actually, most of us. um, and we align our lives that way, but we want to play something that we're not. I don't do that. I don't play myself, but I always think of playing the evil. Well, I don't know about this. This is interesting because I think because I was raised on the early CRPGs like Baldur's Gate 1 and 2, those were games that rewarded good
Mm-hmm.
more than evil. Like you got more items, you got more experience, you got more stuff, you got more encounters. If you got better things happen to you if you took the good path. That was partly because of the time the game was made. They wanted to convince people that this wasn't part of the satanic panic. This wasn't a game that was going to steal your children away into darkness. And so I grew up thinking that if I take the good path, there's more for me. The evil path is something I can take in my second playthrough to take a risk, to do something different. But certainly, I would like to think I want to play games that are different, or play games in such a way that is different than the way I live my life. But I don't think I do. I think I am who I am in a game or not. What about you?
Yeah, I'm the same as you. I think I mostly play myself in terms of more morally speaking. I might, I actually discussing this with Artemis Siri for a while about, the fact that there's RPGs where they give you a blank slate and you make your character, and then there's RPGs where you're playing a character like Witcher, where you're playing Geralt, and actually kind of how cool it is to step into a well-written character and you still make choices. So even in those characters, I can kind of play a character. And I think being the sort of goody two shoes that I always was growing up, and I wouldn't say that I'm a people pleaser in general, but I was always a teacher's pet. I wanted to like please the teacher anyway, right? Total teacher's pet. And so in the same way with the game, if I can see what the developers seem to have wanted for the
Mm-hmm.
character, I'll want to play into that. So that's still me being me, really. So I might not be playing me, but I'm doing what I would do in real life, which is I want to aid in the story that the developer is trying to say, not necessarily subvert it. But so, I mean, sometimes subverting it can be interesting just to see what the developer has thought through for certain things. Like I'm a person who does look for secrets in games, but not so much, oh, I'm going to try to break what they were intending to do. So even when the character isn't me, I still think I play it like me in many ways. Um, and there's a lot of people who talk about that, especially playing something like, let's say, an evil way. And it comes up a lot with relation to what people would do, let's say, if we were Star Trek and nobody had to work for a living anymore, because video games are in many ways a good study of what humans would do if there were no consequences, right, to their actions, or at least no, and there are consequences in the game,
Yeah.
but not to their. And people talk about that the majority of people really on the whole don't seem to enjoy the evil path. And it's because it still makes you feel bad, even when it's
Right.
a virtual game. And that in many ways, while we both know people, I'm sure, who do like to do that, and or you've watched streamers who do like to take the evil path, I don't think it's the norm. I think people in general still like to either play similarly to their own morals, like things that align with their morals, or kind of choose a character and try to go down that path and stay within the world and the magic of the story that's being told. And there are still the shit disturbers out there, and there are the people who are going to try to break the game or break the morality or do something, but I don't think that they're a majority.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and I think you're right. If we're going to take a step back and talk about moral psychology or morality at large and where morality comes from, there's a lot of scholars who have researched this. Jonathan Haidt, for example, has talked about where morality comes from in our psychology. What makes us moral? Especially if we delete religion from the equation and ask, why would we act in good ways? Where would altruism come from? And the answer is it has kept up our civilization. It's kept up our species for a long time. The good path, doing things for people we love and care about, makes our species more successful. There's reward from a generational perspective as well as from an individual perspective, because both things are true. I think generally we feel gross when we take the evil path. There are things that it's when I take an evil path, and I've done this before, when I take the evil path in a game, I don't go for very long. I eventually get tired of it in a way that I don't get tired of taking the good path, because there are rewards in the game that the developers have put in there that because they want it to be satisfying for all types of players and for all kinds of playthroughs. But the feeling of doing bad things gets tiring after a while. I'm interested in what the story might be. I'm interested in where things go, and I'm also interested in telling my own story and finding out where this character is going to develop and how things might change for them. But the reward is usually uh, heavily weighted on the good path in games and in storytelling at large. And I'm like you. I don't know if I was a teacher's pet per se, but I was rewarded for doing what was the good thing in class or the good thing with teachers or the good thing in school, and I got more from that than kids who did the opposite, who when doing the bad thing, they got a different kind of reward. They got a reward and laughter from their friends. And there were times in my childhood experience where I got rewards from both sides, but generally speaking, the more worn path or the deeper groove for me in childhood was pleasing adults, because I got stuff out of it. I got privileges, I got candy, I got gifts and stuff. I got free time, whatever it was, doing what was expected of me. And I think that does translate over in the way I play games. That I feel that there's a way I'm supposed to do this, and so that's what I'll do at least now to see where things go, because I want the biggest reward. But that hinders my experience. Why am I always seeking rewards? For what? To build my inventory even bigger than it already is? Surely there's a reward in just engaging with the story in a natural way.
See, I don't think I do it because I think of the reward. Um, for me, it's definitely more because it seems like the best way to play in terms of the story often. So, and to make sure we're clearly talking about this, games that have a super goody two shoes option and then a completely evil option, both of those options are usually boring to me.
Sure.
I'm really excited about the games coming out where it's not clear cut. And again, coming back to The Witcher, which is one of the best examples of this, that even when you are trying to do the right thing, sometimes there's unintended, in fact, often there's unintended negative consequences. Um, and that there aren't really just clear, like, green option, red option, whatever, blue option, red option, like, that was common for so long in video games where it's just obvious you're just going down one path or the other. I find the good, like the super goody two shoes options, boring as well. So it's not so much about always wanting to do the absolute best thing, because often in storytelling in general, I find the heroes to be the most boring characters. This is a conversation we can maybe have about literature and film as well, and just stories and writing. The fact that protagonists are often so boring, right? And it's the
Yeah.
side characters that are interesting. And the same in games. Like if you're just constantly doing the super goody two shoes thing too, in a way that's boring, because for me everything comes back to expectation and surprise. There's no surprise if you can guess exactly the good thing, or and so it's more that, yes, doing the bad thing just to be different or just to be bad, that's it both feels icky and it's boring in its own way. And that's where it's more coming in and putting a particular personality on it that's more interesting. Having a response or choosing an option in the game that feels true to the characters, that feels true to the world that you're in. If you're in a more brutal world, if you're in The Witcher, the options are darker, they're more brutal. If you're in a really cheery happy world, you might have more obvious happy answers and options. And I think that's important too. Like just always going for the extremes, I think is maybe more boring than just trying to tell a story really through your choices as a player.
Yeah, I was listening to an episode of the Triple Play podcast recently. And well, there's actually two episodes of this. One is who are the best villains, and another is who are the best heroes, who are the best protagonists and antagonists. And, there's a lot of different examples in there. Generally speaking, it's who are the best characters, who have the most interesting stories, who have the best dilemmas that they're put into, and the best motivations. Like villains are always the best when you can kind of understand where they're coming from. Like Thanos in the Avengers movies is such an interesting character because we kind of get his point. There's no one in the world who would say he's completely wrong. In fact, a lot of us would say, maybe he's the right side of history here. Maybe he's got a point. Maybe we're going to have to do something. And that's when a villain becomes interesting, when they make us question what we're doing and we still have to decide what is right or wrong or whatever. But what's interesting about this is this question of how much packaging a character comes with at the beginning. It used to be in games like Zelda, A Link to the Past. Link, the main the protagonist, is a blank slate. There's nothing to him but what you provide. And the things that occur to Link are the things that make up his story in the course of playing. And you can use your imagination to fill in the backstory, but there's a blank slate in terms of tone, in terms of emotion, in terms of characteristics. But modern games really bring in full-fledged characters who are not going to change because of the choices that you make. There are things that make them who they are, and you kind of have to almost role play that to an extent to follow in their choices. Otherwise, there's a disconnect there. And I find that I haven't played enough games like that to really enjoy them and feel them, but I really like that idea that, no, this is the story that you're falling into. You're not just coming in here with yourself and changing everything around you. We've made this, come in as it's been made. Again, Larian Studios, who did Divinity Original Sin and now are doing Baldur's Gate 3. You don't have to pick one of their characters, but if you do, there's rewards. If you pick one of their custom characters that they've already generated with the story and background, you're going to get more stuff happen to you. You're going to have more dialogue options. You might get better equipment, all of this stuff. But I wanted to go back to round us out for the end of this one to what you said about following the right path. Why? You said you don't do it because of the rewards. Is there a bigger reward for you? Like, what is it about doing the right thing that maybe the developers had in mind or that you're creating for yourself? And before you answer, one thing that might help us here is something I heard from someone a long time ago that I've sometimes applied, that, and it's totally generalizing, but that there are 4 categories of people, and it's based on what you want. Do you want to win? Do you want to be right? Do you want to be liked? Or do you want to be free? And we all kind of fit. We might be in 2 or 3 of those categories. We might shift over the course of our lives, but generally there's one thing more than any other that is motivating us. But yeah, anyways, over to you.
Yeah, I don't choose it to get rewards. I and this is specifically talking about story games, right? Where your decisions are story decisions in the way that your character reacts. So it's because I want to tell a good story. And I was trying to think of what does that fit of the 4 that you brought up. And I guess the closest, I was going to say being right and winning are just the same thing. So I don't know. Um,
No, you can lose on a, you can die on that hill, right? You
yeah,
can lose the battle because you're right,
because you're right.
Yeah.
So I think that's what I would have to choose. I guess number 1 is being dying on the hill, being right is definitely my fatal flaw. In terms of motivation, and I think that fits. So if I'm saying what I want to do is tell a good story, regardless if it actually gets me closer to winning, that's more motivating to me than just getting a better reward. I think rewards are boring if they don't have a good story reason. You know, like it. In fact, taking an evil route, let's say, and getting a stronger weapon, or which could happen if it's justified through storytelling of why that is. Sure, that makes sense, but that's not enticing to me, because even if it's a stronger weapon and it would be easier to win, that isn't the character that I crafted. That isn't the story I want to be a part of. So yeah, I do want to win. I do want to win, but any game, if they've given you an option, you can win any of those ways. So I'm going to choose what I think is most right, and that is based on what they've provided me so far and what I think that should be.
This is such an important conversation, risk and reward, when it comes to game design. I read in a book recently, and I honestly don't remember who the person being interviewed was or what game they were talking about, but it was a platformer. And they found in the beta testing in the beginning that people weren't taking any risks, that they were being so careful in every aspect of the game that they weren't actually having any fun. That game designers need to protect players
Mhm.
from themselves, from being overly cautious and careful about everything. They need to protect players from being us,
Uh-huh.
right? And what they did is they set a timer. You've only got 2 minutes to get through this level.
I hate
You
that.
can't. You can't.
I
I
hate
know.
timed games. I
Hey,
hate
hey,
it.
but it worked. And I know, again, I don't remember the example, but it wouldn't have been an example if it wasn't successful,
Yeah.
because it forced the player to enjoy the rush of the level and to
Mhm.
get through it, get to the end, and to take a few risks to get there, to not be focused purely on the rewards and opening every treasure chest. And this is such an interesting dilemma and dichotomy in design between these two and how you balance them.
Mhm.
Um, this is great because we literally, of my questionnaire that I had prepared, we did one question, and that is wonderful because we have so many more to answer. So Lammy, if there was one thing that you wish we had talked about that we didn't, that you want to grapple next time, what would that one thing be?
I'd love to dig into challenges in video games, and therefore challenges in video game development.
That's perfect because it's linked to what we were just talking about, so that's great. Okay, well, challenges it is next time.
Sounds good.